Hey besties, it's Tina,
Karen, and Jules here.
Tools down, time to chat work, life, well-being, and relationships. You're listening to
Let's Take It Offline. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Take It Offline. It's Jules here. This week's episode is all about what's happening in the tech industry. We really wanted to talk about it because it's super topical and just wanted to get everyone's sentiment and also how we've seen the market and what we've experienced, as well as friends and family that have also been impacted. However, before we get started, if you've liked our podcast, don't forget to rate, subscribe, and give us a big thumbs up and let us know through our socials what you would like to hear more about. But before we get started, what's been happening this week, Karen?
This week's been I'm trying to actually take it quite chill this week, given all the changes at work. And I recently am recovering from a car accident as well.
Oh, poor thing. Are you okay? Feeling better?
Yeah, feeling much better. But like through that experience, I learned that like whiplash is actually a big
it
thing.
is
Concussion as well.
Concussion, yeah, because it essentially, someone said to me, it's essentially a brain injury. And to take the time off that you really need, like don't ignore it, because that's something I learned.
Yeah.
And the important thing is to take it seriously, because it might come back to affect you years later.
Can I just say as well that it was such a good reminder of how fickle life is, and because we were having brunch that morning and then like a few hours later you messaged us saying, hey, I'm in hospital. And I was like, no.
I know, it's scary.
It was really scary.
It is, but we all have to look after each other, because one of my colleagues, his wife passed away just absolutely overnight.
Wow.
No idea what happened. And you know, it's just the sentiment of making sure that we look after each other, and
for sure,
and make use of the time we've got together, because you never know.
So I'm being grateful this week.
Oh, absolutely grateful and appreciative.
What about you, Jules? What have you been up to this week?
I have recently resigned. I know, so I am just essentially doing my notice at the moment.
Are you gardening?
I am not gardening because I'm not going to a competitor. However, I will talk a little bit about what my new role is and what I'm going to be doing and why I'm making that shift, because I do think it's topical in terms of what's happening in the market and why I've decided to move away from said golden handcuffs. What about you, Tina?
I just came back from a few days in Melbourne. It was such a really good trip. I saw a bunch of customers, got to go to an AFL game, and that was really fun.
Awesome.
And then I recently just got announced as a finalist for the ARN Women in ICT Awards. So we're not going to find out the result until the lunch, which is the 25th of May, but super exciting. And yeah, just super grateful for, you know, the support network around me and, you know, the people that I've got to work with and mentor me and help me out along the way. So, you know, like there's such a sense of like pride to work in such an industry, and we're surrounded by really smart people all the time. And I think that's why like the recent news around, you know, layoffs, and not just one round, but like now looking at like a second round of layoffs is quite unsettling. And I think we're all three are feeling that way, and I'm sure all of our listeners are feeling a bit of that in their immediate environment as well. But today we kind of want to talk about that and, you know, like really feeling for, you know, our colleagues who are being impacted. But we want to kind of like dive into that a bit more to help people understand as to why this is happening in the context of the wider sort of like macroeconomic situation, and then also talk about, you know, what's life after redundancy and what the options in terms of like your next career move or whatever. But also, you know, just kind of relook into you know, a career in the tech industry. Is that still a valid option? So let's go into the meaty part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in order to like set the scene as well, is yes, we are talking about redundancies, and yes, we are talking about why it's happening. But we see so many colleagues, I think on for me, it's especially on LinkedIn and also friends and family, where they've gone, I thought that tech was a stable industry.
Yeah.
But the thing is, every industry goes through this. So it's not like, it's kind of like the tech GFC scenario,
The
right?
tech bubble has burst.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to come back, because it will.
No, yeah.
This is just short term, probably the next 18 to 24 months until the industry kind of settles. And then we will see it, come back and bounce back. And that's normal.
Yeah. And I guess just to add to that as well, like just in terms of the overall like economic climate that we're in, like I think we went through a really long or like healthy period of boom in terms of the stock market, and a lot of money was dumped into the tech industry. So I think it's only natural that we'll have to go through a period of correction for the value to really align with what is actually happening in the economy and with these companies.
Yeah, I think the writing's been on the wall. It's just a matter of timing and when.
When it rebounds, it's going to rebound and look different as well. So if it rebounds, it might be that the next crop of unicorns will be coming up. So we'll see the new Atlassian, see the new Airbnb, see the new Ubers. So I think that this is a period of time where, like, even though there is a lot of uncertainty, there's also a lot of opportunity that comes with that.
Yeah. I 100% agree, because in terms of, because I work a lot with startups and I work a lot with venture capital investment type companies. Like there's still capital being invested into the ecosystem and new tech companies. It's just that the investments are a lot earlier now. So investors are trying to avoid that sort of like series ABC or pre-IPO. But there's a lot of money going into new companies that are making use of new technology. So you're 100% right. I think within that sort of like turbulence in the economy and in the industry, there will be a crop of new companies coming out stronger if they've got the right product market fit.
Absolutely. And what I'm also seeing is with typical, other tech companies that are fairly established, is they're kind of looking at their P&L, they're kind of looking at their strategy, and they're also looking at headcount. Like if we see, to Karen's point earlier, if we see an influx of hire during COVID, we talked about it before, where everyone's leveling out. Okay, we have overhired. We now need to pull back because we're not growing as quickly as we thought we would, and that trajectory, we're not actually meeting those targets. So how do we actually cut costs? And unfortunately, the redundancies are part of the cost cutting exercise.
Yeah,
I've seen, so in my world, our CSM's gone.
So CSM is customer success managers.
Gone.
We're the same. It's really interesting because I was involved with some of this view as well. There was a lot of analysis being put into utility per head, per hire. And then what a lot of my consulting friends have told me is that they've just done a broad blanket analysis of exactly how many heads are required for the business for its current growth trajectory, and then this is how much of a percentage that needs to be cut, and this is what the corresponding number of people needs to be, and so it's been very, I guess, scientific in the way that they've done it this time round, where pretty much managers have been just given a number to say you need to get rid of this many people or this amount of headcount dollars. And that's how the decisions have been made.
It's actually different in my org, because the way that it was done when we went through our layoffs was that it was all decided at a regional level. So your like manager or skip manager, if you were impacted, they were kind of blindsided. They didn't know.
That's really interesting. And then like I know other organizations have actually taken the approach of just general attrition. So they've gone and rid of the people that are considered like low performing, and then approached it that way, where it's just attrition that in terms of performance as well.
When I started to see this, I mean, I anticipated it, and I really hoped, fingers crossed, I was not going to be part of that wave.
Yeah.
And being a sales rep, I thought we are that revenue generating part of the business. Therefore, perhaps I'm somewhat safe. But then I got really anxious a little bit when I saw Salesforce, I believe. They were one of the first to get rid of a lot of salespeople.
Yeah.
And, you know, it kind of was very unsettling in that respect. And because I'm in the enterprise space, like it takes a lot longer to close opportunities and deals. And sometimes the yield versus the time, the ROI isn't there. So for me, it was like, oh, okay, am I going to get impacted because that growth on revenue, we weren't essentially hitting target to the point where like it was fast enough to justify our roles.
Yeah, I think it's really tricky because I follow some of the friends and colleagues who've been impacted, and it's not always about the performance. As I think Karen mentioned that at your company they're doing, you know, sometimes it's based on like performance, but I feel like for some of the companies it's quite random. It's like a whole functional area getting cut, and so that makes it really sad to see some of these amazing colleagues who you've worked with, and you know they're very capable and very talented, and really really good operators, and you know you still see that they're getting cut.
It's actually really crazy because we see it on LinkedIn, right? And people that we know in the industry that are absolutely phenomenal at their jobs being, you know, made redundant. It's like, you know what? No one is safe.
Yeah. I think the general sentiment is really that, like no one is safe. And I have really sensed like just an overall level of uneasiness across the business. And that kind of puts a lot of people in the mindset that's like, I might not have a job the next day, so I'm gonna just take it chill, like, and not work as hard as I used to as well. Because they're distracted by the fact that they might not have a job the next day.
So it's like demotivated.
Demotivated.
Yeah, I mean that's like at our like personal level, I think we can really understand that, and we feel, you know, very empathetic towards our colleagues and friends who've been impacted. But if you think at a business level, like it makes a lot of sense, because I think we talked about before in terms of like when you overhired, you know, your workforce because you anticipated a lot of growth and that growth didn't really eventuate, then, you know, from a business perspective, and because, you know, these are all public companies, then they have to deliver value to shareholders and investors, it makes sense that these cuts need to happen. And then in a lot of cases as well, we're seeing that the investments are going towards new areas of demand. So, you know, generative AI, for example, is one area where all companies are talking about these days in the tech world. And I'm sure that after this round of cuts happen, there will be a lot more investments and potentially even rehires into these new areas where we see a lot of demand.
I agree. I think that when that happens, it's gonna come back stronger than before, but it will look different.
It will look different. Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like there's been a lot of what's being perceived as copycat behavior. Like some major companies are the first to get rid of a ton of people, but now a lot of companies are also doing the same as a way to relook at like utility per head, cutting layers of fat, from trimming the fat from the business as well. Not just in tech, but we're seeing it across banking now, seeing it in consulting. But yeah, I think that it's across the board.
Yeah. So should we actually look at what life is like after a redundancy? Because we personally all know friends who's gone through that journey before.
Yeah, I've gone through that journey before myself. So I got made redundant a couple of years ago. So luckily,
in your grad job as well.
Yeah, luckily it's not this round, but I have been made redundant before quite early on in my career. So I'll share that today, because at that time, not gonna lie, I felt like my life was like my career was over.
I remember the moment because we were actually at the kickoff conference in Orlando, and I think you like maybe your manager at that time pinged you and said, "Hey, like some changes to your role?
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't. I think it was afterwards.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But there were some reorgs happening in that.
Actually, sorry,
in that team.
Yeah, my manager, I'd been notified before that happened.
Okay.
And then when I saw you at kickoff, that's when I was, I think, midway interviewing for a role, or I
Okay.
had just
Yeah,
gotten
yeah.
a new role. But yeah, well, I'll come to that. But at the time, I really did think that it was over. And during this period, it's actually been interesting. A lot of my juniors have been coming up to me to say, hey, I'm really nervous about the security of my role.
Yeah.
And I've been telling them, trust me, you have nothing to worry about. If it did happen, the grass is greener.
Yeah.
Anyway, but at that time, not going to lie, like it was, when it happens to you the first time, it is quite shocking because, and this is my first learning from it, an advice is to not take it personally, because some of these cuts happen not because of you, but because of how the business wants to be restructured. And at that time for me, it was because I was in an incubation team that was getting now mainstream because it had grown to a certain size. And to not take it personally at all, because that effectively means you can take it this way, that you've done your job so great that they no longer need you in that role. Because that's the meaning of redundancy, is that there's no longer a need for the role you're in. And that's why it's being cut. So yeah, that's one of the key things. And my next thing that I learned from that is to be really aware of what your rights are when you've been made redundant. I think that's where my legal background
I was just going to say
came in
lawyer,
very handy.
Contractual.
Yeah. So what does that look like if you were to
Yeah.
give someone advice as to what they should look out for?
100%. Like I luckily I had studied employment law in law school, so I was like, I'm gonna check what my rights are, just so that I know that I've been treated fairly and I don't necessarily have a case to make against them. Yeah.
And I think for our listeners, you can also tap into Fair Work.
Yeah.
Give them a call if you have any questions about your contract. If you feel you've been treated unfairly, it's free service, right? As opposed to paying for a lawyer.
It depends. Yeah, I think that absolutely the Fair Work Ombudsman is the first place you can check. You can also get free legal advice from a legal clinic.
Aid. I think it's called Legal Aid, right?
Yeah, you can go to Legal Aid for advice, but also your local community legal center. If you're below a certain income level, you get free legal advice. But basically, the main thing to be aware of is, firstly, to check whether you've been let go in an appropriate manner, and Fair Work Ombudsman will have those details. And the thing that I've seen catch a lot of people by surprise are the limitation periods as well, to bring a case if you have been unfairly dismissed in your mind.
Okay.
And in employment law, unfortunately, those timeframes are really short. I think that you'll need to raise an unfair dismissal case within a certain number of days, and I think it's even less than a month. So you need to move quickly if you do think that you haven't been let go accordingly. But each state and each country have different redundancy laws, and in this actual current economic climate, we have seen organizations go, certainly in the first couple of rounds, above and beyond what they are legally required to provide in terms of redundancies. I think Meta was giving employees at least six months of redundancy pay, plus a whole year of health benefits, plus all these additional things that are above and beyond what they are legally required to do. But there are countries such as New Zealand, for example, that don't have labor laws to protect redundancy. So you have to be really clear of what your legal rights are.
It also could even be a good thing, or even in terms of a different perspective, it could even be a new chapter for you. But I'm sure when this was happening, you were probably not thinking that. You were just oh my God, oh no.
Yeah,
right?
and the thing is, that's exactly what happened. But the grass has been greener ever since. I think that what it did is it made me pause and really reflect on what I wanted to do, because I still had an opportunity to move into the banking sector, or I would go for another role in the tech sector, and it actually took me onto a completely new path.
Yeah.
And I'm on closer to the customer. And I think that honestly, I'm really grateful that it happened then.
And I think in that case, you were given the opportunity to actually take on another role within the business, right? And that actually took you on a path where you got to experience a different discipline within the business. But in the current layoff, it's quite different though, because of all of these like mass layoffs, there's no opportunities for people to actually look for other opportunities within the organization. But I think the same mindset still applies in a way that, you know, it doesn't have to be the be all and end all. Like a career at one of these companies is great, but there are also other tech companies that you can look into, because I know at my org, for example, I think a role is got made redundant, then they can't hire the same role for the next 6 months or something like that.
Legally, they're not required to. Yeah.
It's always going to be hard, I think, if it happens to you, especially when you love the company, you love the culture, you love the people, those people become your family.
Yeah.
You know, I can totally understand that it would be so difficult.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, it's a moment for you to reflect and go, okay, what else can I do? What can I do? And we've spoken about this in our career episode, where we talk about upskilling. I've seen people on LinkedIn who have been made redundant go and do more certifications.
100%, yeah.
Right?
And I think if anything, for people who are in the tech industry, regardless of the job was impacted or not, this is a really good wake-up call, because you really can't rest on your laurel, because the nature of our industry is that it moves so quickly. You can't afford to be stagnated, and you know, with all this chats about data and AI, you kind of need to upskill yourself in those areas as well to keep up with the demand and keep up with what customers want to talk about. But I really actually do want to share the story of our really dear friend, and he would know who we're talking about. I think he's been thinking about moving to New York forever, and you know, like, work has been going pretty well for him. He's killing it. He was still kind of like back of his mind thinking about moving to New York, but haven't really done anything about it, and then got affected by the first round of layoff at his company, and then got a pretty decent redundancy package, and now actually applying and interviewing for roles in New York. And I think we just look at that and think, well, that is the universe's sign for you to go and pursue your dreams.
Sometimes you just need that little push. It's like it's when you're in a job that's actually you're doing well in, that's paying you well, it's like such a high bar for a safety net, and that the opportunity cost to leave that is also correspondingly high.
I always think of a safety net, it's not made of mesh and metal. A safety net is like a spider web. It'll catch you, but not forever. So it's always a good way that safety net isn't always going to protect you forever. Be grateful for what you have and upskill and learn constantly so that you do become valuable. And so, Karen, I know you didn't finish your story, but I'm really curious to know where your mind was at. What was the pivoting point for you to go, you know what, this is totally fine? And what were the next steps for you to kind of make things okay for yourself?
Yeah. Well, I cried a lot in the first 2 days. I was like, I think the first person I called was my boyfriend at the time. And I was just like, I've just been made redundant. And I was like crying for 2 days, because I was like, this, like, can't believe it's happened to me. Like, of all people, why me? Like, taking it quite personally. Yeah. And then, but then after a couple of days, like, I was like, okay, well, what are my options here? And there's a sense of action, to Tina's point earlier, when you have loved a company so much, and it's your home and you meet some amazing people there is definitely a sense of like emptiness, because that's your feeling of purpose has like gone.
Can we relate it to breaking up with someone that you really loved and they didn't love you back?
Yeah, I can see that analogy.
No, I was going to say that, you know, like, work is such a big part of your identity.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is that some people, they take it personally because work is part of their identity. But what I really learned through that process is that, number one, it's gonna be maybe controversial if any HR people are listening to this, but like no loyalty to the company, because the company doesn't have loyalty to you. Like you are just a number on the balance sheet. And that is something for you to really keep in mind.
Yeah.
Is that if you're not there, the company is going to
easily
keep
hire
function.
someone. Yeah.
They'll easily hire someone to do the exact same job as you. Yeah, like you don't have to think that it's anything related to you at all.
Yeah.
So, but yes, there is a sense of emptiness that I definitely had. But then straight away, it's like, what do I really want to do next? And that really just drove me. I wanted to be more customer facing. And that took me onto a path where I did a role that I never considered doing. And now I look back onto it and it's the best role that I've ever done. I learned so much from it, and it really challenged me in ways, and it gave me the most opportunity that I've had in any role. I've had the best manager at the time as well, and it really just opened the doors for me to do everything else after. And the crazy thing is I wouldn't have done that role. I had that role as an option at the start, and I didn't go down that path or pick it, but then it came back round to me.
Yeah.
The universe.
It's like what is meant for me for you can never miss you.
Yeah, exactly. So that happened, and this is the advice that I give to the younger generation when they're like really worried about it. I was like, the grass is going to be greener no matter what happens. Like any amount of change is only going to set you on a path that you actually were meant to be on or wanted to pursue. So yeah, and then I was really lucky. The company wanted to keep me and offered me another job, but in this current condition, like Tina said, that's not always an option.
Yeah.
And in that case, take the package that they give you. It will afford you some time to think about what you want to do, and that might be like traveling for a couple of months. That might be going into a completely different industry sector that you have always wanted to do, or it could be a chance for you to like leap into a different organization. But the one thing is that a lot of people do have financial pressures to immediately find another job. Like they might have a family to feed.
I was gonna say,
right?
Yeah.
And then in those times when you look at the conditions where the market is being flooded by all these amazing people that have just been laid off, supply is high. The supply is low, in terms of new jobs. But demand is high. There's lots of people. So in these times, maybe you make a decision where you can't be picky with what you do, and you want to secure something first.
And it's really competitive because as Karen said, there's a lot of amazing people that have been let go. So I think as a recruiter, A, it's going to be easy to find people, but B, it's actually going to be really hard for individuals to set themselves apart. So do what you need to, because I think that is going to be an absolute rat race out there, because a lot of people, as I said, as I know, they're amazing. They're phenomenal at what they do, but also where I have seen people that were made redundant and then jumped into a different role, they have gone completely left field to what they normally do. And that's okay, right? I think that's totally okay. It's a new skill. It's something they haven't done before, and they want to go away and learn. Maybe it's operational rather than sales.
It really goes back to my point earlier, is that the grass is going to be greener no matter what happens. The redundancy, it's going to give you like a good couple of months, or if you're lucky and being with I know someone who was with an organization for 27 years. They would have gotten like a couple of years worth of redundancy pay, which I would just chill out for a little while. Me too. But then also the other piece of advice is that if you were made redundant and you only been in role for less than a month, you're not necessarily entitled to a redundancy. So that's a lot of pressure on an individual.
Can we pause on that for a second, because that's a really good point. Those that are going into a new job and they've kind of been riding the redundancy wave, and now you're going into a new job, there's this sense of security still looming because you're not entitled to a redundancy given what's happening. But at the end of the day, you would have gotten your redundancy package elsewhere. So I guess, much of a muchness.
No, look, the interesting thing is also sometimes in your initial contract, that you signed with an organization, there might be a redundancy clause built in where it says if you get made redundant, you're entitled to X number of months of payout. And it's a traditional practice in some organizations as well. So read the fine print.
Oh yeah,
clearly.
100%, and especially the competition clause in your contract as well.
Oh yes.
I feel like I never pay attention to that until I was leaving until I was leaving for a different competitor.
And that's the other piece of advice as well. If you've been made redundant, to make sure you really check what your entitlements are, because you really don't have that much of a negotiating power or leeway to define what your exit package is going to be. But double click on everything in there, because they might have missed something. And I know someone who had to go back and ask for additional pay that they were entitled to that wasn't included in their payout, and they got it, which is what they deserved. So just make sure that you look out for yourself in these circumstances, and to make sure that you're done right by the organization.
So it's not the end of the world.
It's
There's
not.
multitude of opportunity. I think, Tina, you mentioned last time a colleague, I think we both knew that colleague, and he became a train driver, and he was quite reputable in the tech industry. Like, how amazing is that?
I know, yeah.
Like,
And
what an opportunity.
someone else I saw on LinkedIn as well, and I have so much regard for her, because she's like, I remember when I was still very early into my career, and I saw her in front of a customer and how polished she was and how great she was. And I was actually a little bit shook when I saw that she was made redundant. But I just saw that she posted on LinkedIn about how she went and did a sailing course. And I mean, like, everyone's situation is different, and we kind of have to be mindful of the fact that, some people are really stressed out because of financial situation and security for their family. But I think, like, trying to look for the silver lining in what is happening, and hopefully that, you do have enough of a nest egg that you can actually then think about your next step, and not to be too stressed to jump straight into something, because as Karen said, it's a very competitive market at the moment. Question that I want to pose though is that, is a career in tech still worth it?
Look, I definitely think it's still worth it. Tech is just an ever changing industry.
Yeah.
You learn so much, you never remain the same. And if you are, you're probably, you become one of those people that get made redundant, unfortunately. And it's forever, you're forever the hamster on the wheel, because you're always learning about something new. So I don't think it's a industry that is dying at all, because as Karen says, the next Uber is going to come out, or the next Airbnb. In these times, people become more innovative and creative, right? So in challenging times, people do become more innovative. So absolutely not. Like, I still think that it will be a thriving industry. It's just, as I said earlier, it's the wave of, it's the dip at the moment, and we will certainly come back up.
Yeah. And already I think we're seeing like people who got made redundant from like really big organizations like Amazon or Microsoft or Google, and they're all very talented and smart, and so they're really going out there to start their own business or startup. So
it's actually really inspiring.
No doubt. And if we think about like the .com boom, right? Like I was going to say we were not born there, but we were. We were just babies then. But then, at that point, I think people just thought that, the world was going to come crashing down and there won't be any tech industry anymore, because that was the very first sort of like foray into like the internet and the web and, digitizing of everything. And look how far we've come now. Yeah.
I think that it's still worth it, because I don't think there will be a single company in the future that is not a technology company.
Every company
100%
becomes
agree.
a tech company.
Absolutely.
Because it's transformation either internally or products to customers, etc. But I still think it's the most interesting place to be.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, I alluded earlier that I'm moving roles. I haven't been made redundant. However, I've had an opportunity to sit and look at what I want to do next because, you know, our listeners would know I've been doing embryo freezing with my partner. Like what is a tech role for me look like? It's not in sales anymore.
No.
I'm not chasing the dollars, and I'm not chasing commission, but I want to do something different that allows me to have work-life balance so that, you know, A, I'm going to grow into a new skill, but at the same time, B, I'm probably going to potentially be a mum. So what does that look like?
Yeah. And yeah, also like that's such a great point around where you're at in your personal journey and what makes your career, like how you would make your career works for you. Also, I think like we briefly talked about this before, but when you're in any industry, not just tech industry, but especially in tech industry, because, you know, things change so quickly. Like last year, everyone was talking about Web3 and blockchain and
Chat GPT now.
yeah,
right?
it's all AI. It's all generative AI now. You know, you kind of have to look into the areas of growth within the industry and position yourself so you can actually capitalize on that headwind in the market in terms of, you know, like, well, there's really a shift in terms of like newer tech companies happening now. You know, in the past, I think a lot of people want to work in the enterprise space because that's where you get like a lot of big projects. There's always budget to do things, but these companies are tightening the spending now. It's a lot harder to make things happen. Whereas if you work for more startup type companies, they are in a growth phase. So there's a lot more opportunities there. You know, like AI, for example, again, I said that maybe 3 times today, but it's really, really top of mind for everyone at work at the moment. It's a real race. And I think the more that you can kind of pivot into that area quickly and upskill yourself and find the organization or the team or the segment that is going strong, I think you have a really good competitive edge.
It's also what I'm seeing customers do. They're, instead of spending on headcount, which as you know, obviously based on what we're talking about, people aren't spending on headcount, but more so that they're looking at, okay, with the headcount that we have, we can't afford to put on more people. However, with the tech stack we have, with the people we've got, what can we do to actually maximize the tech stack we have? And AI comes into this as a huge player because they're using machine learning too, whether it's personalization for marketing, whether it's using it for chat and automating a lot of the processes. So AI is really becoming a big part of the process, whereas before it was like a nice to have.
Yeah, and a lot of automation as well in terms of workflow. So it means that you can maybe be more efficient. So, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, will AI replace my job? Not really. Like, you know, like there's still a lot of work that needs to happen around training AI and, you know, putting the right principles and ethical requirements around it. But at the same time, you need to also find those roles where AI can enhance your job
day to day,
enhance your job, and you know, you work in tandem with it, not, you know, for you wouldn't want to be in a role where like it's low value tasks that can be replaced by AI, for example.
The buzzword is that it's your co-pilot. Co-pilot is the word.
Co-pilot everything. I've been seeing that. Yeah.
So exciting times, I think, during these turbulence. There will always be opportunity. And you just need to really think on your feet and stay in touch, have your pulse on what's actually going on so that you can pivot like quite quickly.
I agree. If you look at it from an angle that is really exciting, I think we are just at the cusp of a lot of changes in the industry. And I think with that will come a lot of opportunities. It's just that you need to be quite alert and, you know, keep your eyes glued in terms of like what's happening and how you can capitalize on what's changing in the market.
Yeah, be on the front foot. If you think that your role's going to be made redundant, you know, as I said earlier, sometimes the writing's on the wall.
Yes.
Sometimes you can see it all happening beforehand. You're like, oh, I got to get out, or maybe don't get out. Take the redundancy. That's probably a better option actually.
And sometimes, you know, like it's I think we kind of touch on, like we're gonna keep this episode quite short and sharp and sweet. But yeah, like I think we just wanted to acknowledge the sentiment that's going on in our industry at the moment, and you know, also instilling a little bit of hope that, you know, it's not all doom and gloom, and there will be new opportunities coming, and the tech industry is still very worth looking at for anyone who's thinking about jumping in.
My parting gift is don't forget to find your passion, because this might be a really good opportunity to figure out what that is if you know what it is, and then go pursue it. You know, don't dwell, because I'm a firm believer of not dwelling in life in general, because dwelling does you no good. Go out and do. Again, thank you for listening to Let's Take It Offline. If you've loved what you've heard today, feel free to reach out on our socials. Make sure you let us know what you want to listen to next. But you've been listening to
Let's Take It Offline.